Now it's my privilege to introduce to you once again Dr. Brian Blunt. He serves as president of Union Presbyterian Seminary, and he brings us the word this Palm Sunday.
Good morning. I bring you greetings from Union Presbyterian Seminary. We have campuses in Richmond, Virginia, where I am broadcasting right now, taping this sermon in our preaching lab, and also Charlotte, North Carolina. And I want to thank you at Myers Park Presbyterian Church for the wonderful ways in which you have partnered with Union Presbyterian Seminary, especially in the development and the nurturing of our campus in Charlotte. You have been wonderful partners to us, and we look forward to that partnership continuing in the years that come. Now, as we gather this morning, we are celebrating Palm Sunday. With all that is going on around us, we still have that wonderful part of our church year to celebrate. And as we celebrate it, we turn to the Gospel of Mark, chapter 11, a text that is very meaningful as it presents Jesus and his ministry and what that ministry is about in terms of the larger landscape of what's happening in first century Palestine. So let us turn to the Gospel of Mark, chapter 11, beginning at verse 1. Let us listen for God's word to us. When they were approaching Jerusalem at Bethphage and Bethany, near the Mount of Olives, he sent two of his disciples and said to them, "Go into the village ahead of you, and immediately as you enter it, you will find there a colt tied that has never been ridden. Untie it and bring it. If anyone says to you, 'Why are you doing this?' just say, 'The Lord needs it, and will send it back immediately.'" They went away and found a colt tied near a door outside in the street. And as they were untying it, some of the bystanders said to them, "What are you doing untying the colt?" They told them what Jesus had said, and they allowed them to take it. Then they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their cloaks on it, and he sat on it. Many people spread their cloaks on the road, and others spread leafy branches that they had cut in the fields. Then those who went ahead and those who followed were shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming of the kingdom of our ancestor David. Hosanna in the highest heaven." Then he entered Jerusalem and went into the temple. And when he had looked around at everything, as it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. This is the word of the Lord. The world is in turmoil. Aliens have invaded. The military has engaged. Actor Will Smith plays the role of a pilot who left his fiancée and her son behind when his orders came to go and fight. His fiancée, played by Vivica A. Fox, gets caught up in the melee of an evacuation of Los Angeles gone bad. When everything seems at its worst, she remembers the name of her fiancé's airbase. But when she gets there, with a ragtag group of fellow survivors, she finds that the base has been destroyed. Amidst the wreckage and rubble, she and the others huddle, dispirited and frightened, as the darkness of night and the uncertainty of the world's fate overtake them. Meanwhile, the pilot at another airbase far away cannot stop worrying about her. Knowing her, he figures she will never stop trying to find him. He thinks he knows where she would go looking. He asks for a vehicle to go check, and given all that is going on, of course, his request is denied. So he steals a helicopter. He flies through alien-infested skies because he refuses to give up on her. Back at the decimated air base, she is helping tend to the wounded when a bright light flashes up in the sky. For a moment, she and the others fear that an alien craft has come to finish the devastation. But when she stands up, she realizes that it is a helicopter landing. When the pilot gets out, she can't make out his face. He walks forward in the wash of the rotors and the glare of the headlights. And then she hears his voice call her name. And she runs up to him and throws her arms around him. And when she has finished kissing him, smiling, she says, "What took you so long?" He responds, "Well, you know I like to make an entrance." So does Jesus. Jesus knows exactly how to make an entrance. And for the very same reason, to change the circumstance and to preview the coming victory. In fact, the showmanship behind Jesus' Jerusalem entry reminds me of his synagogue entry way back in chapter 3. He entered the synagogue, a place teeming with people who know the faith and who know the law surrounding the faith. One of the key faith laws concerned the Sabbath. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai, he brought with him stone tablets upon which God had engraved the 10 Commandments. Number 4 on the law list, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. In other words, if God didn't work on the Sabbath, neither should you. The law was intended to ensure that people weren't overworked, that there was always a place of respite in the calendar for the weary in the world. Unfortunately, the people legalized the law. They made the law more important than the people for whom the law was made. So they determined that no work for any reason could be done on the Sabbath. Better to let people go hungry than to harvest food on the Sabbath. Better to let people suffer in pain and brokenness than to allow work and healing on the Sabbath. That's when Jesus makes his entrance into the hustle and bustle of a crowded synagogue on the Sabbath with these legal understandings. And he finds exactly what he is looking for: a person broken in body. There is brokenness everywhere in Palestine. You don't have to look hard to find it, not even in church, perhaps especially not even in church. When he finds a man with a withered hand, he does something uncalled for. He heals him on the Sabbath in the synagogue. Jesus could have waited until the day after the Sabbath to heal him, but he doesn't. He makes an entrance to make a point. And to ensure that the point is not only made but witnessed, he asks the man to stretch out his withered hand so everyone can see not only the brokenness, but so they can see the exact moment when Jesus works the work of healing on the Sabbath. This was not urgent care. This was not triage. This was a routine doctor visit that could have been, should have been handled with an appointment on the following day, the safe day. But Jesus is not in the synagogue to be safe. He's in the synagogue to make a point. God's people come first. That's why the Sabbath law was created, to protect the people. Now it was being used to harm the people. So Jesus makes an entrance to challenge the inappropriate use of the law and the leaders of the people who were inappropriately using it. Is it any wonder that before Jesus can even get out of the synagogue, the leaders start plotting to destroy him? Preach the vision of a new heaven and a new earth out there in the future all you want, and people will either praise you as a prophet or ridicule you as a fool, but you preach the possibility of changing what is happening on this current earth, in this current place, with these current laws for these current people, and people in power will use their power to put you down. Jesus knows this. And yet he keeps preaching that the inauguration of God's reign has changed not only how people should relate to God, but also has changed how people should relate to each other in church and in society. He claims that he is the Lord of the Sabbath and therefore Lord of the law. He claims that he is God's Messiah. He claims that he, not the leaders, not the law, represents God's intentions for God's people. And he claims that the way he lives his life represents the way that God intends for God's people to live their lives. And how does Jesus live his life? Touching lepers, discipling women, eating with sinners, feeding the hungry and breaking the law to do it, proclaiming racial and ethnic equality between Jews and Gentiles. That is why he made that synagogue entrance, to highlight that life. Well, the Palm Sunday question is, why does he make this Jerusalem entrance? Are they connected? This is not some entry into some unnamed synagogue back in Galilee.
This time, Jesus is making a grand entrance into the capital city with the historic temple mounted high up against the horizon. There is no separation of the sacred and the secular, no division of church and state in the first century in Palestine. The Sanhedrin, the congressional seat of religious and political power, it operates out of the Jerusalem temple. The temple and the city represent together the base of religious, social, economic, and political power for the people. All that spiritual splendor, all that political power, all that righteous recognition. But the people can't take their eyes off of Jesus because he knows how to make an entrance. They know who he is, what he stands for. They know that Jesus, the Jesus we learned about back in the synagogue in chapter 3, that Jesus in Jerusalem is code for capital chaos. Righteous rumble, holy hubbub, spiritual stink, sanctified spasm, theological tumult, messianic mess. Walking to Jerusalem is walking into trouble. Making change in a little backwater town with minor politicians and neighborhood associations and block watch captains is one thing. This time, Jesus is going into the capital and directly challenging the people who make the laws, interpret the laws, and enforce the laws. The laws like he broke back in the synagogue in chapter 3. Too often we miss the point of this Palm Sunday entry into Jerusalem. Maybe that's because it's a sneaky entrance that manages to hold everybody's attention because it appears that Jesus actually doesn't want anybody's attention. You tell people, don't touch this plate, well, they've got to touch it. You tell people don't look, they've got to look. You tell people to shut up, and even the ones who have nothing to say start chattering up a storm. I'll be darned if you're going to tell me what to touch, where to look, what to say. The moment Jesus starts sneaking around, telling people to go in without drawing any attention, well, every disciple he has around him starts paying extra attention. Actually, that's good. He needs that. He needs them to be paying attention when he makes his entrance so that when he makes his point, they get the point. You know what he does? He doesn't go himself. Sneaky, right? Not yet, at least. He sends just 2 disciples. Not enough to be noticed, but enough to get the job done, a quiet job that will ultimately speak volumes. Okay, boys, go into the village. You're going to find a colt that has never been ridden. Untie it and bring it. Somebody's going to say something. Somebody always says something. You're going to say, the Lord needs it. They're going to just let you walk away with it, sight unseen, questions unasked. Well, what just happened? You like adventure stories? I do. James Bond, Mission Impossible, Harry Potter. What's a good adventure story without a good password? Passwords and passcodes let you know when something or someone is safe. Blinking lights, blinking car headlights in the dead of night. 1 blink if the coast is clear, 2 blinks if the bad guys are on to us. Or to gain entry, you need the right password. Passwords that people wouldn't normally use, like Balderdash or Banana Fritters or Fairy Lights or Wattlebird or Fortuna Major or Flibbertigibbet or Oddsbodkins. What's the password? Scurvy Cur. Okay, come on in. Or sometimes there are entire password phrases. If I say, it looks stormy today, the safe response is, I don't own a raincoat. If I say, it's a beautiful day, but I don't know where the sun will rise, the password response is, he is risen. There are, of course, real historical passcodes, 1 if by land, 2 if by sea. The uninitiated person just sees a lamp lit or 2 lamps lit. They don't have any other cares in the world other than being able to see when it's dark out. The revolutionary person knows that the British are coming, and by what means. I see a passcode. Jesus, already persona non grata with the traditionalists because of his non-traditional, transformational, law-breaking, tradition-defying behavior, can't just operate out in the open. Neither can his people, because what he is doing will be stopped. So the revolutionary spiritual spy master issues the instruction to his messenger disciples for communicating through code. This is how they are to communicate through code. Go into the village. When you enter, you'll find a colt. It has never been ridden. Now, how in the world would they know which colt had never been ridden? Well, You'll know because when you get near the right colt, someone will ask, why are you untying it? That's them asking for the password, see? You must respond with this password, the Lord needs it. The reasonable responses will be, what, Lord, and what for? But they won't do the reasonable thing. They won't ask the reasonable question. Since you've given the right password, they'll just let you have the colt because they'll know by the code that I am here and I am about to make an entrance and I need this colt to do it. So they will just let you have it. Do what I say in the way that I say it, and you will end up right back here with the right colt. Because what I am doing is as radical as it is important. And there are people who are as determined to stop what I am doing as I am determined to do it. Mark 3, verse 6. The Pharisees and the Herodians go out to take counsel how to destroy him. They are as determined to stop what he is doing as he is determined to do it. Because what he is doing is a threat to the way people want things done, the way things have always been done, so that the people who have always benefited will continue to benefit. That is why Jesus resorts to such subterfuge. He knows that if the wrong people get wind of what is about to go down and what that going down is about to represent, that he, not the temple leaders, not the temple infrastructure, not the Roman rulers, is the one who represents the way of God's rule on earth, then they will do everything in their power to stop it. Jesus wants to make sure they can't stop it. If they can't identify the parade route, the parade horse, and the parade's grand marshal, the parade is likely to parade on. What would it be like if our churches were so engaged today in such liberating, life-transforming, mission-mesmerizing, world-altering, faith-shifting behavior that the Christians who behaved that behavior needed to use passwords so people in power couldn't challenge our empowering until it was too late? Well, by the time the leaders catch on to what is happening with Jesus, it is too late. It's already happening. The people are proclaiming Jesus as Messiah. They are proclaiming Jesus' revolutionary way as God's way. The leaders know that if Jesus' way is indeed God's way, then their politics and their way, Rome's politics and Rome's way, is on the way out. They therefore realize that they must make Jesus stand down because Jesus has already put his plans into motion. Though they can't stop him, they can't stop the parade. Jesus knows that. Jesus also knows that once the people see him in the parade, in this Passover parade, making the kind of entrance he plans to make in this Passover parade, they are going to go crazy. The Old Testament scriptures are important here. Zechariah 9:9 tells them what to say. Lo, your king, your Messiah, comes to you, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. That is how Jesus comes riding in. Well, that's some prophecy Jesus is modeling. That is some entrance Jesus is making. When the people watching the Passover parade see the spectacle of this man who has been healing the sick, raising the dead, touching the lepers, including the Gentiles, walking the waters, breaking the laws, proclaiming the coming of the reign of God, now entering the city of God on this animal of prophecy, don't be surprised if they lose their collective religious minds. And that is precisely what happened. People throw down their cloaks on the road before him, the way they do for a king. People wave leafy branches at him the way they would do for a Messiah. Then the parade ahead of him went out, and the people paraded ahead of him. They go out shouting in word what they had just proclaimed in deed. Look here. Here's the Blessed One. The Messianic One, come in the name of the Lord, the one who will inaugurate the coming of God's new reign, not the scribes' reign, not the priests' reign, not the politicians' reign, not the temple's reign, God's reign, God's kingdom come through him. What do the Jerusalem people and the Jerusalem and Roman authorities who see Jesus riding in on the colt do when they see such a spectacle? Well, the crowds will do their thing. They will shake the city. The authorities will do their thing too. They will shake themselves into action against Jesus. We know how it turned out, because in the end, they can't let Jesus or the crowds make the point Jesus is using this entrance to have them make, that he is the one in charge. They will shake that truth by crucifying Jesus. And that will be when God will make God's entrance on the backside of the cross to change the circumstance and to preview the victory that is coming. Mark wants us to see things on two levels. One level, everything is out of control. Of the Palm Sunday scene, Professor Tom Long says, on one level we see the wild, even chaotic forces of the present age, forces that will spew out their bitter venom at Jesus and in a terrifying frenzy crucify him. At this level, everything is random and unpredictable. On another level, Jesus has it all worked out. Perhaps that is the solace we can take about our own lives as we follow Jesus. Sometimes everything seems way out of control. In those times, know that Jesus has it all worked out. Whether it's something that happens for no discernible reason, like an illness, like an accident, like a loss, like a weather event, like a pandemic. You know, something you weren't anticipating that swoops into your life and disfigures and disrupts your life, and you wonder how this could happen. Or perhaps it is something that happens because of what we ourselves have been doing. Perhaps like Jesus, we saw some injustice, we spoke out or acted out against it, and now people are angry with us. Authorities are challenging us. All of a sudden, we have all this negative attention because we were trying to do what we thought was positive in our church and in our community. Like Jesus, who ushers in the reign of God through his life and his ministry and challenges the way authorities have structured life in Palestine in ways that are not just for everyone. And now the authorities from Jerusalem have lined up in opposition to him just as he is ready to enter Jerusalem. It all seems out of control. And yet, it is in just this moment that Jesus has everything planned out. In our lives, as in his life, Jesus has everything worked out. Well, you could say everything didn't seem to work out right. After all, Jesus dies in the end, doesn't he? After all that meticulous planning, he got caught. He got crucified. He still died. That doesn't sound like the kind of plan I want to follow, the kind of life I want to live. If this is what we see, we are missing yet another level of the story, the level that is above even Jesus' plan to live out the representation of God's rule in our world. That level is God's plan. God, too, has a plan. God, too, is making an entrance in the story and the Jerusalem story that will follow. And at the very point where it appears that Jesus' plan breaks down, God's plan kicks into high gear. Tom Long says it this way: at the first level, Herod is king, Caesar is Lord, Pilate is governor, the demons rule, and they will all team up to take Jesus' life. At the other level, Jesus is Lord and King and Messiah. The forces of heaven rule, and no one will take his life. He will give it freely. The first level is visible to all. The second is seen only through eyes of faith. Can you see it? Jesus' plan and God's plan working itself out. Mark is trying desperately to get us readers to read this story and ultimately our own life stories through such eyes of faith. To see that even though humans like Jerusalem authorities think they are in control, even when they think they are in control, God remains in control. Even in anxiety-producing times like the one we are living in right now, when it appears that our lives are spinning out of control, God is still in control. Jesus is Messiah. There is a plan. God has a plan, and God is executing that plan even when, and perhaps especially when, it appears that things are not happening the way they are supposed to be happening. That's what's echoing out when the people shout out, Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. In their eyes of faith, for a moment, they glimpse God's plan. The person who stands up for what is right ought not to be punished for it. The person who lives her life faithfully ought to be rewarded with a secure life of good health, good people, and good prospects. Like Jesus, he stood up for right. He was right. So why did people do him so wrong? It doesn't make sense unless we see it through the eyes of faith. Only then do we see the plan, God's plan. Yes, God has a plan for Jesus, for the people who follow Jesus, for us. That plan is on parade at the gates of Jerusalem right now. The plan involves us working for God's rule as Jesus makes an entrance representing God's rule. If we believe that Jesus is Messiah, then we need to act like he is Messiah. That means we need to fight for his rule, not just celebrate his rule with palm branches, but fight for and live his rule. That means we ought to represent his messianic way in the way that we live our lives. That means that wherever there is a law, a government, a person, a condition, a circumstance that prohibits people from becoming the people God would have them be, we must figure out a way to make an entrance and secure a change. Where there is injustice, we oppose it. Where there are laws that are hurting God's people, we break them. Where there are untouchables, we touch them. Where there are broken, we heal them. Where there is fear, we fight it with faith. Where there is a society that operates against the messianic mandates of God's humble Messiah, we shake it and we shake it until the old foundations crumble and the foundation of the new thing that God is doing in our midst takes its place. If we are the people of the Messiah who is riding in, making his entry into Jerusalem, who made that grand entrance on that grand day in that grand city, it is time we figure out when and how we represent him. We parade him today. It's time for us to figure out how to make our entrance. Amen.